Ben Cooper costumes are those smock and mask costumes primarily seen in photos of kids in the 1970s and 80s. Although the costume company goes back further than that. What are Ben Cooper costumes? Starting at the top, they include a mask made out of very thin white plastic. The mask then has the details printed on it to look like the character they are trying to portray. The mask then has an elastic string. Earlier versions of this string were stapled onto the mask. This staple would always poke the person on the temple. Later, the end of the string would have a metal piece that would be bent up to avoid poking. But it still kinda did. The next part was the smock. The typical Ben Cooper smock was usually either sewn together or sonic welded together. The smock would almost always have the name of the character or series emblazoned on the front. Sometimes it had details of the character's clothing. Other times it was just that character's face or that entire character. Let's move on to Ben Cooper's history. Ben Cooper Incorporated started in 1937 when Ben Cooper began to create costumes for Halloween, which was becoming more popular during the Great Depression. He bought A.S. Fishbach, a children's costume company, and the classic smock and mask costumes became a big part of Halloween. Ben Cooper didn't invent these costumes. Collegeville and Halco had done it for close to a decade before. But Ben Cooper did get licenses quickly on the whim, and those whims would pay off. One of the first costumes was for the, at the time, recent Disney animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. As the years passed, the costumes became more popular, most notably in the 1950s through the 1980s. The Universal monsters were a hit, but the costumes left a lot to be desired. The smocks looked nothing like the characters, and Dracula's mask looked more like Dr. Frankenfurter than the famous Count. Other examples of Ben Cooper costumes were Popeye, Spider-Man, Casper the Friendly Ghost, Bozo the Clown, a Devil, the crew from Star Trek, the Dukes of Hazzard, the Thundercats, Masters of the Universe, and many, many more. The costume I remember the most is Quicksilver from Silverhawks. It's one of my favorite childhood costumes. The costumes were hot with little breathing room. The mouth and nose holes didn't do much, and some kids had problems with the eye holes. Personally, that pesky staple on the sides were my biggest problem. These were everywhere. More than half the kids wore them on Halloween. Then, they just disappeared. DIY, quirky, and higher quality costumes took over, and that was that. Then, in 2021, Spirit Halloween brought back the Ben Cooper style costumes. This time featuring Star Wars characters Yoda and Darth Vader, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Leonardo and Michelangelo, DC superheroes Batman, Superman, and The Flash, and finally Gizmo from Gremlins. These costumes update the smock part with thin polyester. The masks have also been improved. The plastic is much thicker than the original versions. There's a foam on the forehead for some of the masks to help with how they fit on a user's face. And finally, the mask is held up with an elastic band. The band is looped into holes on the sides of the masks. No more staples. The overall look of these things are silly, but they're meant to spark up conversation about costumes of the past. Some of these are true to the character. Others are true to the Ben Cooper spirit. See what I did there? The ones that are true to characters are Superman, Batman, Leonardo, and Michelangelo. The Flash and Gizmo are close to what we would have gotten back then. The closest thing to reissues are Darth Vader and Yoda, which use the same images as the vintage, except blown up. Speaking of differences, let's take a quick look at what changed. I understand that there are several costumes to different popular characters, so I'm not going to sit here all day explaining each tiny detail. I just want to have fun with this. Starting with the most popular character of all time ever, Batman. His vintage mask says Batman, as well as his bat signal on his chest. As a side note, the Batman mask was also used for the Daredevil costume. Imagine Spirit trying to do that today. There would be lawsuits up their bat hole. Superman used to have that blue highlight like in the comics. That would have been pretty sweet to see today. The Flash used to be true to the character. One version of the mask has the Flash and logo on his forehead. The Turtles used to have a logo on their chest, and the mask, well, they look like something that I would have drawn back in elementary school. Then there's Gizmo. They used to have him sitting down and waving. But both images are still pretty sweet. These are a lot of fun and completely nostalgic, which is what I'm assuming was Spirit's plan. After opening my set of these, that were kindly donated by my good friend Jambot, I really want to get the rest of them. I'm only missing the Flash, Darth Vader, and Yoda. But I can tell you that the Star Wars ones were the most popular. Those Star Wars fans are crazy. The Ben Cooper, Collegeville, and Halco costumes are so iconic that even artist Carl Hatemuller Jr. did a series of images depicting superheroes in their Ben Cooper uniforms. These are a lot of fun and sometimes hilarious. It makes you say, what were they thinking? And then after that, and we accepted this? In 2021, Frank Romano passed away at age 97. He was one of the iconic artists that created images for the costumes, including Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, Alien, and many more. His most iconic piece has to be his first for Ben Cooper, the Devil. These costumes are legendary for exennials and back. This is what we had for many, many years. I remember parents not liking them, saying that they were cheap and a waste. Well, we didn't think so. We loved seeing these costumes in the schoolyard during recess. We loved talking about what we were going to be before Halloween. We loved hearing the whoosh whoosh of the plastic rubbing against more plastic when we walked. And then the muffled trick or treat, followed by another muffled thank you, were some of the simplest and best times of our lives.